You are outmatched, Earth. Sauron's voice echoed through the chamber, a deep, resonating sound that seemed to vibrate in the bones. The time has come for you to surrender. Your tribute is due, or face the consequences. Jackson stood motionless, staring at the projection with cold eyes. His team, each one trained in negotiation and diplomacy, stood by silently, knowing what was at stake. For the last few days, humanity's finest minds had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment. They were ready for everything but this, a demand for tribute and submission to alien overlords. Sauron's projection flickered, the four eyes narrowing. This is no mere request, Jackson Price. This is your last chance. Our fleets are already positioned. Our forces will destroy your planet in days. Your people will be reduced to dust unless you comply. Sam Bell, his arms folded across his chest, shifted uncomfortably. What they're offering us is a death sentence, he muttered under his breath. Leonard Grant gave him a sharp look, but said nothing. Jackson's eyes never left the projection, his face as unreadable as stone. In the silence that followed, the members of the Galactic Council shifted, sensing the anticipation, feeling the inevitable tension in the air. Jackson's reputation was known across galaxies, an American diplomat who had once saved an entire colony from destruction with words alone. But this was different. There would be no quick negotiation, no easy escape. This was a battle of wills, and Jackson had only one weapon left: the truth. "We will not surrender," Jackson said, his voice calm but laced with an unmistakable fury. It was a simple declaration, but one that carried the weight of Earth's defiance. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Some of the alien representatives sneered, while others seemed momentarily stunned by the audacity of his response. Jackson could feel the weight of their eyes on him, but he did not waver. Behind him, Leonard Grant's expression remained cool, as always, but his fingers tapped lightly on the data pad in his hands, signaling his readiness for any outcome. Sam, ever the pragmatist, remained alert, his mind already calculating escape routes, potential allies, and most importantly, options if the situation escalated. Sauron leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "You misunderstand the power you are dealing with, Jackson Price. We do not make threats. We make demands. And when they are not met, we obliterate." Jackson met Sauron's gaze unflinchingly, his words sharp and measured. "Then you clearly don't understand us," he said, each word like a stone thrown into the calm of the Council's arrogance. "You've miscalculated. Earth does not bow to threats, and we will never be part of your empire. We will fight, and we will destroy you." Sauron's eyes flared, the contempt in them now fully evident. He had expected negotiation, perhaps even capitulation, but Jackson Price's defiance took him off guard, as did the quiet but lethal certainty in his voice. Sauron had underestimated the human spirit. "How dare you?" Sauron spat, his many arms flailing in agitation. "You will regret this insolence, human. Our fleets are already positioned at the edges of your solar system, within a few rotations of your planet. You will witness the full power of the Galactic Council." There was no fear in Jackson's eyes, no sign of panic. Instead, he smiled faintly, a slow, deliberate smile that made the Council uneasy. "We've faced worse," he said, the words carrying the weight of centuries of human resilience. "And if you think for 1 second that you can intimidate us into submission, you clearly haven't studied history." Sam's voice broke through the tense moment. "Jackson, we need to move fast. They're already mobilizing. We've got one shot at this, and it'll take everything we've got." He didn't look to Sauron as he spoke, but to Jackson, whose face was now hard as iron. "I know," Jackson replied without hesitation. "I've been in worse situations before. We've all been." Behind them, the entire room seemed to freeze for a moment. Jackson's words cut through the tension like a knife. It was clear now. There would be no easy retreat. The fate of humanity hung on this one moment. Earth's defiance was not just a refusal to bow. It was a declaration of war. Sorowan seemed to simmer with rage, his voice booming through the chamber once more. You are making a mistake, Jackson Price. No human has ever stood against us like this. Your arrogance will be your undoing. Jackson's eyes never wavered from the projection. We don't need to win every battle. We just need to survive long enough to make you regret ever thinking Earth would bow to you. The transmission from Sorowan ended abruptly, leaving the room in cold silence. The council had withdrawn, but the damage was done. Jackson Price had just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The humans would fight, not for tribute or surrender, but for survival. And the universe was about to witness just what that meant. As the lights dimmed, Leonard Grant approached Jackson, his voice low. This is just the beginning. We'll need everything we've got to survive what's coming. Jackson's eyes were hard now, his resolve unshaken. I know, but we're human. We don't give up. Not when it matters. And with that, the fate of humanity was sealed. The challenge had been made, and the Galactic Council would soon learn that the human spirit, when pushed to its limits, was not something easily broken. The human fleet's first counterattack was a disaster. Jackson Price sat in the war room aboard the USS Resilience, his fingers steepled in front of him as he observed the chaos unfolding across the galaxy's digital screens. The simulation of the alien fleet, represented by thousands of blinking red dots, seemed endless. Their ships, massive and advanced beyond anything humanity had, were already pushing forward to Earth's outermost defenses. Sam Bell, seated to his right, ran his fingers through his close-cropped hair in frustration. They're already here. We underestimated them. Their armada is too vast. Our outposts are falling one by one. Jackson's eyes never left the display, though his mind was racing. The situation was grim, but he refused to let it show. He turned his gaze toward Leonard Grant, whose normally stoic face was lined with concern. Leonard leaned over the holographic table, tapping through the latest intelligence reports. We need more time, Leonard said. We've got a few days at best before their fleet reaches the core systems. The technology is there, but we don't have the infrastructure to launch an effective defense. Jackson exhaled slowly. Time is something we're not going to get. The Council won't give us that luxury. Sam, ever pragmatic, muttered under his breath. Then we make them give it to us. Jackson turned to him. How? Sam met his gaze, his eyes narrowing with determination. We'll hit them first. Harder. Guerrilla tactics. We won't play by their rules. Jackson smiled faintly. It was just the kind of strategy that appealed to him. A calculated risk. It was the kind of strategy that had worked in Earth's history time and time again, against greater odds. We'll need every ship we've got, Sam. And we'll need a way to penetrate their defenses. Leonard, any ideas on how to even the playing field? Leonard paused for a moment before responding. I've been looking into their weaknesses. The Council relies on a central command ship, a behemoth called the Addisian, which directs the entire fleet. If we can cripple that, we stand a chance. But getting close enough is a problem. Jackson's mind was already working, the pieces of the plan falling into place. We'll use their arrogance against them. They think we're weak, divided. We need to make them believe we've already thrown in the towel. You're talking about a decoy, Sam said, understanding immediately. Something they can't resist. They'll chase us right into the trap. Jackson's eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. Exactly. We'll send a small strike force to draw them in. Once they're close enough, we hit them where it hurts. And we'll make sure they're underestimating us the entire time. Leonard spoke again, a slight edge to his voice. But that's a one-way ticket. If we don't get it right, we'll lose everything. Jackson met his gaze without hesitation. Then we make sure we get it right. It's not a gamble if we know how to play the game. The plan was set in motion swiftly. The USS Resilience, along with a handful of smaller ships, would draw the Council's attention by launching a feigned retreat toward a supposedly weakened sector. They would leave a trail of vulnerabilities, a few strategically placed communications blackouts, a couple of outposts left seemingly undefended. The alien fleet, itching for a decisive blow, would surely pursue. Jackson's role was clear: to act as the bait. He would remain on the Resilience, playing the part of a panicked diplomat, desperate for a way out. But the truth was, Jackson had already anticipated the Council's next move, and he had a backup plan in place. As the fleet set off toward the outer reaches of the solar system, Jackson briefed his team one final time. Remember, they'll be watching every move we make. We can't afford mistakes. When we make our move, it has to be fast and brutal. They think we're scared. We need to show them that fear is the last thing they should have. The words settled over the team like a heavy mantle. Leonard nodded gravely. Sam cracked his knuckles in quiet anticipation. They were ready. Or at least, they had to be. The next few days felt like an eternity. Every moment was a delicate dance of deception as Jackson and his team manipulated the fleet's movements. Each shift meant to draw the Council's attention deeper into the trap. The alien fleet, led by Sorwan, was relentless, and yet they couldn't resist the scent of victory. Jackson had been right. They were blinded by their own arrogance. The final move came swiftly. With the Council fleet in pursuit, Jackson ordered the Resilience to break off from the main fleet, taking a sharp turn toward the Ataxians' coordinates. In an instant, the trap was sprung. Sam's strike team, now hidden in the shadows of asteroid fields, opened fire on the unsuspecting fleet. The Resilience, its cloaking systems activated, reappeared at full speed, launching an assault of its own. The enemy, taken by surprise, scrambled to respond. But the advantage was short-lived. Despite their ingenuity, the humans were still vastly outnumbered. The alien fleet recovered quickly, their counterattacks swift and devastating. The small human force found itself struggling against the overwhelming might of the Attican and its fleet, with Sam's team fighting tooth and nail to stay alive. Jackson's voice crackled over the comms, steady and resolute. Keep them occupied. We'll hit the Attican while they're distracted. Leonard, do we have enough time to get through their defenses? Leonard's response was terse. We've got one shot. No more. The tension in the air was palpable as the plan unfolded. Jackson knew that this was it, the moment that would define humanity's future. Either they would cripple the Council, or they would be wiped out. The Resilience came out of the shadows once again, its weapons firing on all cylinders as it surged toward the Attican. The alien ship was a fortress, but Jackson had expected nothing less. This wasn't about raw power. It was about precision. The Ataxian shields flared against the human onslaught, but Jackson had prepared for this. A fleet of human bombers, hidden in the depths of the asteroid belt, launched their payload in a synchronized strike. The bombs hit their target, tearing through the alien ship's defenses with shocking accuracy. In that moment, Jackson allowed himself a single breath of relief. It wasn't over, but they had made their mark. Target is down, but they'll regroup, Sam reported, his voice heavy with the strain of the battle. We've got a window, but not much of one. Jackson nodded. Then we take it. We push forward, no retreat, no surrender. The battle raged on, the fate of Earth hanging in the balance. Jackson's mind raced with the next steps, always planning, always thinking ahead. This was far from over, but humanity had just taken the first step toward victory. And Jackson Price had no intention of stopping now. The hum of battle still rang in Jackson Price's ears as the USS Resilience limped back into orbit, its once pristine hull now scarred by the brutal engagement. The Attican was crippled, its massive form drifting through space, leaking fire and smoke like a wounded beast. But Jackson knew that this was just the beginning. The Council's forces were still vast, and their retribution would be swift. Sam Bell stood next to him in the war room, his face streaked with soot, his eyes hardened by the weight of their losses. The strike on the Attican had been successful, but the alien armada had retaliated with even more ferocity, scattering their forces and reinforcing their defenses. The humans had taken a small but critical victory, and now they had to figure out how to turn that into something more. "We did damage," Sam said, his voice low, almost reflective. "But they're not done. They'll come back stronger." Jackson's eyes were fixed on the galaxy map projected in front of them. The dots representing the alien fleet had regrouped, shifting into a formation that suggested they were planning their next move. The tactical advantage they had gained from crippling the Addisian was slipping away. Time was running out. Leonard Grant entered the room, his face grim but resolute. "I've been analyzing their fleet movements. They're positioning themselves for an all-out strike. If we don't act fast, they'll wipe us out." Jackson met his gaze, his resolve unwavering. "Then we act now. We hit them hard. We don't wait for them to come to us. We make them chase us." Leonard raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" Jackson smiled, though it wasn't a reassuring expression. "We'll draw them into a trap. We'll lead them right into our strongest defenses and hit them with everything we've got. They think we're outnumbered. Let's make them regret that assumption." Sam chuckled darkly. "Classic human strategy. Use their overconfidence against them." "It's worked before," Jackson said, "and it'll work again. We just need to make sure they're looking in the wrong direction." For the next few hours, the team worked tirelessly to refine their plan. They would feign retreat again, drawing the Council's fleet toward Earth inner systems, where their strongest remaining forces would be waiting in ambush. The idea was simple. Draw the Council in, make them think they had the upper hand, and then hit them with a counterattack they would never expect. Leonard worked on coordinating the fleet's movements, ensuring that each ship would have the right position at the right time. Sam, ever the tactician, organized the fighter squadrons and support craft, making sure every pilot was ready to strike with precision. Jackson's role was to ensure that their deception worked. He would be the one to make the first contact with the Council, acting as though humanity was on the brink of collapse, ready to capitulate. The Council would think they had the upper hand, and that's when they would be caught in the trap. The next few days were filled with the tension of waiting. Jackson spent his time in the war room, studying the movements of the alien fleet, his mind working overtime as he prepared for the next phase of their plan. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden chime from Leonard's console. "They've taken the bait," Leonard said, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "The Council is on their way. They're falling for it." Jackson's heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained calm. "All ships are in position?" "Yes," Sam replied, his voice steady but laced with anticipation. "We're ready." "Then it's time to move," Jackson said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Execute the plan." The moment the order was given, the USS Resilience surged forward, its engines firing with all the power they could muster. The rest of the fleet followed, a wave of ships breaking free from the shadows of Earth's atmosphere and moving toward the Council's incoming armada. Jackson watched as the alien fleet, blinded by their pursuit, moved closer to their trap. Then, as if on cue, the human fleet turned, forming a defensive line at the edge of the system. The alien fleet, now fully engaged, was moments away from entering the firing zone. The tension in the air was palpable as Jackson's team waited, counting the seconds, knowing that once the first shot was fired, there would be no going back. "All ships, prepare to fire," Jackson ordered, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of their collective hopes. The moment was here. They had only one chance to make it count. The first volley of fire erupted from the human fleet, a barrage of energy weapons and missile strikes that tore through the alien ships with devastating precision. The Council ships faltered for a split second as their defenses tried to adapt, but it was too late. The humans had already launched their second wave. Fighter squadrons and support craft that swept in, cutting through the Council's defenses like a knife through butter. The USS Resilience launched its own attack, its weapons lighting up the void as it fired on the largest alien ships, including those closest to the Addisian, which had somehow remained functional despite their initial assault. The human forces were hitting hard and fast, just as Jackson had planned. "Direct hit to the Addisian," Sam reported, his voice tinged with triumph. "We've breached their shields." But Jackson knew they couldn't stop there. The Addisian was still dangerous, still a formidable opponent. Focus fire on the Addisian, he ordered, his eyes never leaving the battle unfolding in front of him. The battle was chaos. Alien ships were exploding in every direction. Human pilots were engaging in dogfights above Earth's surface, and the vacuum of space was filled with the echoes of energy blasts and debris. Jackson's team was right in the thick of it, leading the charge against the alien onslaught. As the battle raged on, Jackson felt a surge of hope. The Council's fleet was starting to fracture under the pressure. The humans, with their tenacity and resolve, were fighting back harder than ever before. The Addisian was taking hit after hit, its engines beginning to fail as its once imposing form started to crumble under the onslaught. But then, as the final blow was about to land, the unexpected happened. The Council's remaining ships retreated, pulling back in a coordinated withdrawal. The battle, though far from over, had shifted. For the first time, the humans had forced the Council to flee. "Victory?" Leonard asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. Jackson allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but only a moment. "We've won this round, but they'll be back. We're not done yet." The battle wasn't over, but the human resistance had shown the universe something important. The Council had underestimated humanity, and now they would have to face the full wrath of the human spirit. Jackson Price's quiet confidence remained intact. This was just the beginning of humanity's fight for survival. And Jackson knew that if the Council wanted to win, they would have to go through every last one of them. The tension in the war room was suffocating. The human fleet had gained ground, but the Galactic Council was far from finished. Jackson Price stood at the center of it all, his eyes focused on the star maps and data feeds that flickered in front of him. The Addisian was in ruins, but its death was only the beginning. The true threat was still out there, a far more dangerous force than they had anticipated. The Council was regrouping, its fleet consolidating for one final assault, one that would end the war one way or another. "We've forced them into a corner," Leonard Grant said quietly, his fingers flying over his console, processing data and making the final calculations. "But they're gathering their full strength for a last-ditch strike. If we don't stop them now, they'll come at us with everything they have." Jackson's gaze remained fixed, his jaw clenched. The plan had worked so far. They had drawn the Council's forces into a series of costly battles, and each time, humanity had fought back with ingenuity, courage, and sheer willpower. But now, the Council's remaining fleet was on a collision course with Earth. This would be their final stand. "We've bought ourselves some time," Sam Bell said, his voice a mix of determination and pragmatism. "But not much. If we don't hit them now, it's over." Jackson turned to face him. Sam had been with him through it all, through the darkest hours, through the moments when retreat seemed like the only option. But here, in this moment, there would be no retreat. It was time for the final push. "We've got one shot at this," Jackson said, his voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "We fight them where they least expect it." He glanced around the room, meeting each man's eyes. Leonard, always the strategist, nodded solemnly. Sam, the practical one, cracked his knuckles and gave a slight smile, more grim than anything else. "Let's do this," Sam said, a glint of fierce resolve in his eyes. The battle began, as battles often did, suddenly and with no mercy. Jackson's forces moved swiftly, luring the Council into the outer reaches of the solar system, where they had set a trap. The alien fleet, their arrogance still fresh from their earlier victories, took the bait. They pursued, confident that the humans were fleeing. They thought they had already won. But Jackson had a different plan. The first phase of the operation was a series of calculated distractions, missile strikes, decoy ships, and false transmissions meant to confuse and delay. The Council's fleet responded predictably, drawing closer to the heart of the trap. The human ships, smaller and faster, darted between asteroid fields, drawing fire while the core of the fleet assembled. Then, as the Council's flagship, the Zenith, came into range, Jackson gave the order. "Now." All ships, engage. The human fleet erupted in a wave of coordinated fire. Energy blasts tore into the Zenith's shield, weakening them with every strike. It was a desperate gamble, one that relied on precision and timing. The alien flagship retaliated with fierce intensity, but Jackson had anticipated that too. Leonard's calculations had been spot on. As the Zenith fired its weapons, Jackson's fleet moved in, positioning themselves to exploit the flagship's weakest point. The battle raged in the depths of space, human and alien ships locked in a deadly dance. "We've got them on the ropes," Sam said through gritted teeth, his voice barely audible over the comms. "But they're not backing down. They're pulling out their big guns." Jackson's eyes darted to the screen. The Zenith had just deployed an armada of fighters, an overwhelming wave that threatened to break the human lines. But Jackson wasn't worried. Not now. Not when victory was within reach. "Send in the reserves," Jackson commanded, his voice a commanding calm. "We hold the line." The reserves, the last of humanity's best pilots and engineers, rushed into the fray. The Resilience, still limping from the previous battle, became the rallying point for the remaining ships. Its weapons fired with deadly accuracy as they moved into position to flank the alien fleet. The Zenith was starting to show signs of damage. Its shields were flickering, its weapons slower to recharge. Jackson saw the opportunity and seized it. All ships, focus fire on the Zenith. The concentrated barrage from humanity's fleet tore into the flagship's defenses. Jackson could feel the heat of the battle in his bones as the energy blasts lit up the screen. This was it, the moment they had been fighting for. "Damage to the Zenith is critical," Leonard reported, his voice tight. "Its shields are failing. We're almost there." But then, as if the universe was testing them one final time, the Zenith launched a devastating counterattack. A massive wave of energy spiraled out from the flagship, sending shockwaves through space. The blast hit the human fleet with such force that several ships were torn apart in an instant. "Hold steady," Sam shouted, his voice barely audible over the comms. "We can't let them regain control." Jackson's heart raced as the blast rocked the Resilience. The ship shuddered, and alarms blared across the bridge. He could hear the sounds of metal groaning under pressure. For a split second, it seemed as though all hope was lost. But then something shifted. The human fleet, battered and bruised, fought with a renewed fury. The Resilience, its weapons fully charged, launched one final salvo at the Zenith. And then silence. The Zenith shuddered and exploded in a violent flash, sending shockwaves through space. Its massive form crumpled like a paper ship, breaking apart in the vacuum. The alien fleet, caught in the wake of their flagship's destruction, hesitated. Jackson's breath caught in his chest as the realization hit. The Council's fleet was in disarray. Their commander was gone. The rest of the armada was retreating, broken and leaderless. "We've won," Sam said, his voice strained but full of triumph. Jackson looked out at the wreckage, the remains of the Zenith floating in space, and allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought of the lives lost, the countless sacrifices, and the cost of victory. The Council had underestimated humanity's will to fight, and now they would pay the price for that mistake. Leonard's voice broke the silence. "We've won this battle, but there's more to do. The Council won't forget us. They'll come back." Jackson turned to face his team, his eyes filled with both pride and determination. "We'll be ready." For a moment, there was silence, an understanding that this was just the beginning. The war wasn't over, but humanity had proven something today. They had fought back against an empire that believed they were invincible, and they had won. And as the human fleet watched the retreating Council forces, Jackson Price knew one thing for certain. Humanity was not done. Not by a long shot. "We'll rebuild," Jackson said, his voice steady with resolve. "We'll fight, and we'll win again. This is just the start."